Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PR Hour live training. Today, it's just me and Amanda. It's August, and we're on our own, and nobody's turned up. And I think it's because it's holiday time, and I don't blame you. So if you're watching this on repeat, I really hope you're having a wonderful summer. Or if you're just watching us repeat, it might be December, who knows? But anyway, we've got a great PR Hour live training coming up for you. This is all about, can PR really work for anyone? And do we all have a story? So you might be new to PR, you're just looking for inspiration. This is the session for you. Now, before we get started and I introduce Amanda, I'm just going to explain my background, because you're probably thinking that's a bit chintzy and, you know, where is she? I'm actually on holiday myself. Look, this is my beautiful view. So I'm actually on holiday. I bought myself a little caravan in lockdown and having a great time working from my caravan and going on adventures. So forgive the backdrop. I'm not in my normal office. So anyway, welcome, Amanda. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. I love the way you've described your background, because mine is this one, because I'm renovating a cottage. So we're all not quite in our normal places today, are we? So
it's like we're completely different to how you normally see us, but that's all okay as long as we offer value and lots of mega great tips. That's the most important thing for anybody watching this. Now, we might have some people jump on as we go along, so that's fine, you know, and then we can get them involved in it. But we've obviously prepared for this, and we want to share as much with you as we possibly can about, you know, how you can get your story out there. Does it really work for anybody? And kind of how to find the story. And the great person to share this with you and give you all the tips and advice is Amanda. And I'll get Amanda to introduce you. If you haven't met Amanda, you were in for a treat. Amanda, just tell us a quick overview of your background and experience and how you've been helping our lovely members.
Oh, thanks. Very kind. So my name's Amanda. I am a digital comms specialist, but a lot of the work that I do is around PR, and I've been working in the charitable sector, not-for-profit sector, for the last 20 years. And prior to that, 10 years working with volunteers in the voluntary sector as a volunteer myself, doing PR, and I've done all kinds of different PR, everything from PR for a Chelsea flower show garden to royal visits for the hospice that I worked for, some emergency comms, all sorts of stuff. So yes, I bring quite a wide experience base to the table, really.
And you've been working and helping our members now for, well, quite a while actually, haven't you? Which has been lovely. So for any of you that most of our members are doing the PR themselves and learning and getting the inspiration, and either having the PR lead or using the media database. Amanda is there if you need that a little bit of extra support. If you want someone to help you write a press release, if you just need some strategy, she can help you. And she's working with our members, and you're enjoying it. They're wonderful, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And sometimes, you know, it's just a half-hour chat, and then other times we sort of take it a bit further and it's a bit more sort of structured and formal sort of contract. But yes, I am here to help. And like I say, sometimes that's just a quick chat on the phone and a bit of guidance. So yeah, that's fantastic. That's all good.
So let's get started today. So the topic to start with is real life events and finding a story. Do you want to take us away with this bit? Because I think this is one of the simplest ways. Most people set up their business because they've either got a backstory or an emotional story, or they've got a passion, or they've set up to help somebody. These are the types of stories they can use, aren't they? So how do we get our real life stories across and secure publicity?
Okay, yes. So working within the sort of voluntary sector, one of the things that I have used a lot is people's real life stories, and definitely within the last 18 months, 2 years, I've been looking at those stories a lot more. And I think everyone has a story, but not everybody tells their story. And, you know, especially setting up a small business, people do that because they've got something in their heart that they want to share or that they want to do, basically. So I think everybody does have a story, and we're all at heart, we love to hear about other people, don't we? We love to hear about what's happened to them. I don't know about you, but I'm quite nosy. I like to read people's real life experience, either because I want to learn something or I want to share my experiences. So, for instance, let's take when you become a parent, the people that you are surrounded with are that peer group support is other parents, isn't it? You know, and it's the same. You read people's stories and you have a connection, and you go, oh, I like that, or I understand that, or I want to know more about that. And then you go away and you Google that person or you Google that business. So really, you're looking to inspire other people. And I think one of the things that we've talked about before, Rachel, is starting with this sort of end in mind as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But we'll share with you, and I'll give the links to one of the clients that I've helped recently, Phil and Helen at Discover Tai Chi. Now they've got a fantastic backstory, which when we talk about, they've started their business because of their own lived experiences. Phil's backstory is that he's an amputee. He lost the lower part of one of his legs, and then they've set up their Tai Chi business, and this has generated for them so much publicity because Phil, for a start, is very comfortable sharing his backstory, and he's quite happy to do that. And again, we'll come on to why that matters in a bit, and I'll talk about that. But it's finding where we can place that story to get coverage. So you do have a lot of magazines such as Happiful or Breathe or O, which are based on people's lived experiences. That's what their content is about. Those are really quality magazines. They allow you to tell the story in a non-sensational way. Whereas if you look at, say, The Sun or The Mirror or something like that, they do share people's stories, but there's a lot more sensational element to them. So I think when we talk about what is our story and how we're going to share that, it is, where is that level do you want to be? Where do you want to place your story? So looking at the media and where that wants to be, where you are comfortable sharing your story. So what is your story and where do you want it
I think that's
to
a
be,
massive thing,
really?
what you just said. Just before we carry on, Amanda, your microphone is just popping just slightly. I don't know if you can just move
Is
it a
that
little bit
better?
away from you.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Am I too
that might be a bit
loud?
better. Yeah, no, it's just popping when you're saying certain words, but
Oh,
anyway, I'm sure it's fine. So you're right about the sharing the emotional story. And I think that's where some of us do have their fears or concerns, because if they've got a really emotional story, you don't want someone to sensationalize this. And I know I had this
yeah.
happen to me when I had a double page spread in Grazia magazine. I shared my story, but they sensationalized the headline, and I felt physically sick because I proofed the story, because I had permission to proof the story, but couldn't proof the headlines, which you can't always do. So it's matching the right type of media outlets, isn't it? But also not just where you want to be, it's where your customers are. And
Yeah.
it's what you're trying to achieve from sharing your personal story, because PR isn't about ego. It's about, like Amanda said, and I always say, start with the end in mind. Are you looking to raise your profile? Is it for credibility, or is it for more customers? Which is probably all of the above. But if you're wanting to reach your customers, and let's say it's just a women demographic, I know this is a really basic example, you're not going to go in men's health. You don't really want to go in men's health. You want to be in a lifestyle magazine. If you're a coach and you're looking for clients, that are going to pay a couple of £1,000 with you, you're not going to be looking to go into some of the sensationalist weekly mags, are you? You're going to want to go in psychologies or some of the more kind of ABC1 higher profile demographic magazines. So that's important, isn't it? Matching the two together.
I'm just going to change my headphones.
Yeah, no worries. So, we talk about that all the time, and matching the media outlets to the customers that you want.
Then hopefully I won't be popping.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Perfect. Wonderful. So it's really important, isn't it, Amanda, to make sure that you have that balance of putting your emotional
Yes.
story, but it's great to share your emotional story.
Yeah, and I think an example of this is somebody approached me last week, actually. He's a motivational speaker. He has the most amazing backstory, an amputee again. He's been on the Fast Show. He's been featured in a program with Davina McCall. He's done so much like TV stuff. It's amazing. But he was just like, I'm just not getting the bookings. And I think when we say, start with the end in mind, it's like, okay, how can we leverage that amazing coverage that he's got? Like the Fast Show was a really long piece, magazine piece on there. But it's not generating the sales that he wants, the bookings. And again, that's great coverage, but now how are we going to leverage that? How are we going to put some calls to action there? Where are we now going to place that stuff to give him more coverage to make sure that he's securing the business? And I think that's how can you tell your story to impact your business?
And how would you recommend that? Because sharing those stories you write is great, and going on the Fast Show or the One Show, whichever, sorry, forgive me that you said.
Oh, this is the One Show. Did I say the Fast Show?
No, I don't know what my brain's, because I'm like thinking of everything as well. The One Show, so it's absolutely fantastic. So how can you leverage that? Well, it's good to share you as being featured on the One Show. People will have heard about it, but I suppose this is where the key messages come in place, don't they? And having maybe, like you say, the call to action, because people will Google you if they're interested in your story. And then this is where PR is part of a marketing strategy. You've got to have your website ready. We don't want to go into too much into this today, but it's making sure that your end result, you're not just sharing your story for glory's sake. You've got a real, everything's ready. Your ducks are in a row, as they say, and that you've got your call to action on your website so that you can leverage it. How else could you leverage a story like that?
I think definitely, obviously, you want to be prepared, like you say. You're going to, if that phone is going to start ringing, you want to know, you want to be in that position. But I think there are lots of other ways. So you can share that story with more local, hyper local. So let's just take the One Show example. Actually, then sharing that with local media, saying, I've been on national TV, but I'm locally based. I'm based in Nottingham or Leeds, wherever, and building the relationships and getting on your local media, if that's where your sales is going to be. If you want people to sort of come into your shop, for instance, as if say it's retail, then you want to connect with those people locally. If you're based in Leeds and you've been featured on the One Show, people who live in Cornwall aren't going to necessarily be able to access your shop. Do you know what I mean? You need to do that stuff. So you can share that and turn that story from a national story into a nice hyper local story. Obviously, sharing it on your your social media platforms, sharing it like in a wider marketing context within the other digital stuff that you're doing. Also, like your other marketing materials, as featured on the One Show, as featured on the BBC, that sort of thing is going to get you some leverage. But I think with other local journalists and with other media outlets, it's approaching them and say, I've been on the One Show, I've been on this program, this is my story. I'd love to share my story with your readers. And
I think you almost need to get on it straight away as well, don't you, Amanda? Because while it's a fresh story in the mind, a week later is going to be too late. They want to pick up that story while it's running. So if you have the coverage, you need to jump on it straight away, don't you, and get it everywhere. Or if you've been fortunate enough to know that you're going to be featured in a glossy magazine or a magazine that's coming out in advance, you've got plenty of time to prepare so that you can go to all the other media outlets so it all fits perfectly together.
Yeah, and I think there are some other impacts that sort of being in a magazine or in Metro or on the BBC, whatever, is you're gaining like kudos with amongst your peers, for instance. So you can do other things with that. So PR obviously is much wider than just media, but it could be speaking gigs. that then lead you onto another audience. So you've got that in your toolkit, really, that you can share with people. You know, if you want to get more speaking gigs in your sector and you've got all this other media stuff, you can leverage some sort of kudos there.
Brilliant. So can you show, so we're both checking our notes. If you can see us looking away, it's because we've got notes.
Yeah, that's what we
for these
do.
events, you know, so that's why we're looking away. It's not I'm just bored, I'm checking my emails or anything like that. So you've got examples that you can share with. So have you got any screen examples that you wanted to share that you could screen share, or do you just want to talk through, because you've given us the one? Have you got any more, or should we move on to the next point?
Well, I've got
or should we put them in the links?
I'll put them in the links. I've got a sneeze coming. I just want to warn you there, if I sneeze. But yeah, so I think for my coverage with Phil and Helen at Discovered IT are absolutely super duper, because they really use their backstory to be able to do this. I'm really sorry, I just need to sneeze. I'm going to just
mute
get
yourself.
rid of myself.
Yes, please do. Yeah, that's fine. It's interesting actually, because one of the questions I want to ask Amanda next is when we share a story, and I talked about this the other day with my members actually in our PR Hour lives, is do the media, if you share your story, will the media share that story again? Does it become part of you every time, or is it a decision that once you've shared the story, that's it? They don't want to know, is it old news? Or are people happy to share their story time after time, like your examples, or like Janetta, for example, that we know she's got a very powerful story? It becomes part of you, your story, doesn't it? So, you know, do you become like, someone's covered you off, we're not interested, or will the media still cover that story?
I'm going to say they'll still cover it. You know, like I say, Phil's very, very happy to share his backstory of how he lost his leg. And actually, that's part of their business. That's part of their raison d'etre. And although it's not always featured as the top line, so we had him in Happyful, we had him in Business, Bradford Means Business, we had them in Diabetes UK. Only in Happyful was it the headline. Only there was it the top of the story. In the other pieces, it was there as part of who they are and what their business is about, but we're like in the third paragraph about the backstory. So it's still interesting. I think when something happens, it's still interesting because you're reaching a new audience. It's presented in a different way, you know.
So for me, when I had Mums in Control, I set the magazine up to achieve the work-life balance, you know, so that was my story. I couldn't share it, the magazine, you know, just because I shared it once. However, what I would say is, if let's say you wanted to be an inspirational woman and share your story on how you achieved it in something like Psychology's magazine or the Daily Mail, they're probably going to only run that as a one-off story, because then say, well, the Mirror might say, or the Mail might say, Psychology's run that, so we're not going to run that. But if it's part of your overall, you know, then they're going to keep running it, but you just have different content and different value come away. It doesn't become everything within the story, does it? You then move on to the services that you offer.
And you can reframe it. Okay, so like the stories around first aid, which I've done quite a lot of, when to get people learning more first aid, we tell stories about how people's lives have been saved by using first aid. But you take somebody who's done CPR, there's so many stories there. There's the person whose life is saved, there's the family of that person, there's the person who did the CPR, there's the team that trained that person that did the CPR. You see, there's the story, you know, and that's the story that I have. I saved somebody's life, but I can reframe that story in lots of different ways, and I can pitch that story in different ways as well. And I think that's important, looking at how you can reframe the story to achieve the end in mind. What is the end in mind? You know,
so exciting. I keep wanting to jump in, so apologies. So yes, so you can reframe the story as well. If there's a trending news story and you know you've got your version of it. Talk us through that. So if, let's say, I don't know, there was some accident or something happened and some celebrity saved someone's life, they're going to then want case studies, aren't they? Have you saved someone's life? So it's that kind of example, isn't it, that you can then use your story and ride off the back of a trending story.
So a classic example of this was British Heart Foundation did the Vinnie Jones Save a Life campaign. Because I had such a good relationship with, it was BBC Radio Stoke actually, flipping love that radio station. They rang me straight away. They're like, Amanda, we've got this coming out. What can you do? I'm like, I can send you somebody in the next half an hour to come and do CPR in the radio station, in, you know, which we did CPR live on air. But that wasn't our story. I didn't send that press release out. But I gave them somebody whose life had been saved, a trainer to train the, like, you know, on-air training. You know, I was able to ride off the back of that story.
And this is where I think it's, you know, and I'm checking my notes again, this is where it's really helpful to help the media, isn't it? You know, because like you and like I used to all the time get phone calls from BBC WM, and I flipping love BBC as well. You know, it's just brilliant because once you're in their little black book, they have their database. Of course, they're going to be using Media Matchmaker to check for experts and everything as well. But they have their little black books and they come back to you time after time. So every time you just happen to say something, that might be then another story that they'll want to pick up on. It has a snowball effect. So if you can help the media with anything, it's great, you know, just point them in the right direction, isn't it? Because then you've got more chance of going back time after time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you are clear about what your story is, the more people will obviously get to know you, and they'll get to know what your business stands for, what you are about. So if we take, let's take the Body Shop, for instance, you know, set up by Anita Roderick. Everybody knew what she stood for. Every story that they did was around the ethics and sustainability of that business. And, you know, whether you knew her backstory or you didn't, you knew what they stood for. And I think that's the thing you can demonstrate, especially if, like, when your business is set up through something that's heartfelt on your experience, like Phil and Helen. You know, people get to know about you. And as we always say, Rachel, it's about telling, not selling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. And then we're going to come on to this in a minute, from using the emotional connection and getting that right. And we're just going to remind people of that, because I think that sometimes is what the bit that clicks for people. And once that clicks, it becomes easy. But before we move on that, so turning your business purpose and mission into a brand story. Can you talk to us about that?
Okay, so new widgets are not news. There's new products being, like, launched onto the market every single day, every minute of every day across the world. Then that's not news, is it? It's like, oh, there's a new widget. Ooh, that's not news. A family's home made safer, better, warmer by a new device or a new widget. That's the story. If I'm going to save 350 quid on my gas bill by a simple widget device, that's the story. You know, so it's what is your business, what's the purpose of it, and how are you going to reach a connection with people, and know that your brand stands for something, and you're starting to tell that through your press. So Dobby's, the garden centres, have some really great examples of this, and you can just access their news desk basically by going on the website and putting in news desk press releases. So through their press releases, they are doing a lot around environmentally friendly, peat-free compost, for instance. All their stories are around that sort of story, so that they're placing themselves as a business that supports like peat-free, sustainability, environmentally friendly stuff. So that's a way of doing that, basically. Does that make sense? I feel like I've sort of rambled a little bit there.
No, and that's be good, and we'll put the link to that so that you can actually see it, because it's good to see real examples, and it's exactly right. And then using that story with the widgets, and maybe if it helped with the energy, there was a story in the news just last week about how energy prices are going to be hiked up, I think, by a lot anyway every year, so as if they're not high enough already. That would have been a great timely story then, wouldn't it? But our widgets, a company is now going to save people from poverty, and like, it's coming onto this emotional connection, isn't it? And this is everything that PR is. And I think that once you understand the finding of your story, but making sure that it's right for you with the end in mind, that you're not just getting coverage for coverage sake, making sure that you've got the angle of it, but you've got your key messages across as well, because like you said, what's the point of it if you're not going to get anything? So you leverage it. So with PR, sometimes it can transform your business, obviously, but sometimes it takes a little longer for it to filter through, doesn't it? And you've got to still help yourself with it. It's part of your overall marketing strategy. So
I think one of the examples I really wanted to use here was Tom Shoes. So Tom Shoes set up this ethical business, like buy one pair of shoes, get another pair of shoes. Absolutely brilliant. Catastrophic, sort of like went like this, absolutely amazing, taking off. But of course, then they've gone into the hands of administrators. So I was like, oh, maybe that wasn't a good example. But that is where that was an amazing story, and it was all about the brand. It was all about the brand, and actually, everybody was all over that story when they launched Tom Shoes. So if they hadn't have then gone into administration, it would have been a really good example.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know running a business is hard, but we also know that some PR can go horribly wrong, which is a whole different topic, isn't it? We all
crisis management we'll do another day.
We all know the certain things, but anyway, on a, bringing it back to finding your story, that emotional connection. Let's move on then to the emotional connection, and you may have heard us, or this might be one of your first replays that you've watched. You're in for a treat if you have. If you've seen many of us, you know that we talk about this a lot, and it's telling your story, not selling your business. PR tells, advertising sells, and we've kind of drummed this in over the years, haven't we, Amanda? And it's so true. It really is true. And your job as the journalist is to introduce you. Your job is to be the great source of information, is to share the story. And you know this with your marketing. We know that, that gone are the days where you can just send your offer out and do the hard sell. We give value now. We support, we share stories, we share the background, and then people buy into you. PR is exactly the same, isn't it? And it's about this emotional connection rather than us selling. Like you say, they don't care about the widgets. They want the story, the backstory behind it. So if you got any examples or any wisdom you want to share with us from that?
Yeah, I think we do tell stories through the people that our products or services sort of affect, and the first aid one is a really big one for me, because obviously that's something that I've done a lot of, is the emotion in helping save somebody's life or being in that situation. And journalists do like the stories where there are heightened emotions. We're sort of like super sad, super happy, here's the winner of the lottery, and we sort of know how that changes people's lives. And there are stories out there that are not generated by press releases, i.e. like crisis, famines, earthquakes, buildings collapsing. Those are all like, we get to hear people at their most vulnerable then. And I think that's something to remain conscious about. If you're writing about somebody else that you've worked with or that you support, or your own emotions, is remaining sensitive to people's emotional vulnerability, and treating your case studies, and that could be that you could be writing about, with sensitivity and respect, really, not sensationalizing that story. We're going right back to what we were saying before, placing the story where that's going to be dealt with sensitively, especially when we're talking about raw emotions, like saving somebody's life.
you know, you can end up with PTSD with that sort of thing. You need to be sort of sensitive of that. And I think confidentiality, you can use case studies where you are protecting people's confidentiality. And again, we do that a lot in things like first aid or dealing with people's financial situations, etc. And when you offer up those stories, make sure that everybody agrees with the content and understands the impact of sharing their stories, especially if you're sharing somebody who is a vulnerable adult or a child story. You know, the impact of having your kids in the media is that people recognize them, they'll ask them about it, you're opening them up to a whole sort of can of worms, so you need to be careful about that, and so that people understand the impact. If you're going to be on radio talking about something that's very personal to you, are you ready for somebody in your, I don't know, down the village shop to start talking to you about that in front of a shop full of people? You know, so those are things, and that could be your story that you're sharing. It could be you. So just think through some of those, the impact of what that might be. And that might be just tweaking some of the language that you're going to be using in your press release, you know. So yeah,
and
just
talking
kind
of that, can I ask, one of the kind of questions I'm often asked is that sometimes it's easier to share a story or create a story, if we've got a story, but an emotional connection if we're selling to the public, to consumer. But if we're B2B and we just want to be in the business press, well then, do these principles still apply? So can we just write a technical story? Do we have to still put the emotion in it? How do we get B2B publicity and get a story?
That is a very good question, and you're probably asking the one person. I am all about the emotional stuff. I think you can, you know, if
I know the answer to this, and I was going to, sorry, so I might have put you on the spot, because I've spoken to lots of B2B journalists, and it's still sharing the value, isn't it? And so let's say if you were, I don't know, cybersecurity, and you were going into businesses to set up from a cybersecurity, they're not interested in the software behind it and what does it. They're interested in the bits, the end results, that the business hasn't gone down, it hasn't lost this turnover, it's now saved this, you know, all the impact it's had. Or people, you know, if it's cybersecurity and they're working from home, they've got to put systems in place. It's how now that they're allowing their employee, sorry, I know I've kind of stuck then. So it's knowing how that it's still sharing the emotional story, even if it's a B2B. You can be more technical, can't you, with the business press and the trade press, and they may expect you to. But one of the easiest ways to check if your story, how it's going to work, is by reading the media outlets you want to be in and see what their headlines are like, see how technical they are, see how long their articles are. Then it gives you a flavour of how you can create and duplicate the story, but in around your story. And so the principles are the same, really, Amanda, aren't they? But I know I'll put you on the spot because you're more.
You did, but having said that, I'm just about to start working with a business which is all around print management, which is not my normal sort of thing, but it's really exciting because they do a lot of sustainable stuff. And so yes, I shall be taking that forward. But yeah, I think, yeah, if you want to know how to place a story in a certain magazine, you need to be reading that magazine. And to be fair, if you deal in widgets, you'll probably be reading Widget Daily or, like, you know, Widget Monthly or whatever. So you kind of know what you want to be and how they present their stories. You know, and there's different kinds, and don't forget, there's just like different kinds of stories within those magazines. So, you know, being in just having a news feature, that's great. Oh, here's our new widget. But actually, you might be in a amazing people in our community on the day in the life of, or those sort of articles within either colour supplements or local newspapers, where actually they are asking you a lot more about yourselves. And I'd be placing my clients in some of those sort of outlets as well. for instance, the guy who's the motivational speaker, I want to get him onto a county-based podcast which talks to amazing people in the county, you know. So there are other ways of getting that story that's not just straight sort of like his news. There's sort of, we're talking about bigger features and just thinking about, oh well, yeah, actually I'd like to be in the life of the day of on the back page of the Sunday Times colour supplement. You know, that would be a great place to be.
Yeah, and sometimes it's thinking about quality, isn't it, not quantity. So here's a question for you before we wrap this up, because it's all been about finding your story. Do we have a story? Have you ever come across anyone, so anyone that's new to this or is just looking for refreshers, just been stuck for ideas? Before I ask you this question, I'm going to say to you, if you want to come up with inspiration, go to the 6-week publicity challenge in the Media Matchmaker Club and access that, because that takes, it doesn't take 6 weeks, by the way. I must change the headline for that. It just takes you the 6 steps that you need to take to kind of think about your story and how to find your story. And there's loads of videos in there and templates that you can download. There's also 47 tips, PR tips and stories that you can kind of get in there if you're looking for inspiration. But have you ever come across, and I think the answer, I know what the answer is going to be, does everybody have a story, Amanda? Is everybody able to do PR for their business?
Yes, everybody has a story. I think I'm just genuinely, I would say sometimes I say I'm nosy, but I'm genuinely really interested in people's backstories. I think, you know, when you speak to people, everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has something to say. And we're intrinsically interesting.
Yeah, and I think that the best way to get inspiration, as we've said, is to go to your media outlets of where you want to be. You know, just pick 5 or 10 media outlets, whether it's radio, listen to those radio channels, listen to how the debates are from a local point of view, and think about, would that be debate to be interesting to their readers, their audience? Is it are they your customers? Listen, you know, watch the look at the online blogs or the online industry you know, websites, read the magazines, the trade magazines, and see how they're talking. Some of them have forward features lists, so they know what they're going to write about in advance. So especially with the trade B2B magazines, ask them if they've got a forward features list so that you can see what their topics are, because they kind of know what they're going to talk about in advance, and see whether your business fits. There's lots of ways to get inspiration, isn't there, Amanda? See what's trending. We talk about this a lot as well. Set up your Google alerts, see what's trending, and see if you can comment on it and become the influencer. Is there any final tips that we can share with people to give them the inspiration and the confidence to know they've got a story?
Awareness days is always a big one. You know me, I love a good awareness day. I think the other thing that I'm just going to say here is, remember your happy customers are great advocates for you. So if you don't feel comfortable in doing this, for instance, or doing, like, speaking in front of people, like in a bigger scale on TV or radio, there are other people in your business, in and around your business, customers who are happy, who might want to do this with you and will help you take these ideas forward. And yeah, I mean, talk to them as well.
But also I think
this is a really good group. This is a really good group for inspiring each other as well. So get involved in this group.
Yeah, so we have the PR Hour Lives at the beginning of the month that you can get involved with, where we share our stories. But I love what you just said. Sometimes we just need the inspiration, don't we? And then we're off for that. It's like, oh my God, of course. And sometimes we forget why we've set up in business, because we're so busy trying to get the customers, trying to balance cash flow, trying to run it, that we forget, you know. But so it's like Amanda's just said, and I love that. Speak to your customers, say, what made you sign up? What made you buy that product? And it might be something you didn't even realize. And that's your story, your new angle, isn't it? You know, I'm on holiday, as you can see, you know, we went shopping yesterday, and we were in this beautiful little seaside area. And Susan, my friend, just moved to the area so she can walk to her local beach. So she now wants to buy a lightweight either beach chair or sun lounger. So now we're picking up and going, how many kilograms is this lightweight aluminium, but that's the story, isn't it? You know, that we made it lightweight so our customers can buy it, so they can walk down to the beach. It's just, you know, it's revolutionary, not having to look the heavy ones. It's why your customers are buying things from you. That's the story.
That's such a now story. I mean, and that's the other thing, is that, like, I'm off now. I'm like, well, we're all doing staycations. Like, if you're walking down to the beach with your half a dozen kids, you want something that's really light, you know, travel light in your car when you go away. There's a whole thing. You see, once Rachel and I get going, we're away.
But this is true though, isn't it? This is the reality of it. They want to know the story, the emotion behind it, of why we didn't want to lug it, because the Prosecco is the most heaviest important thing to carry, not the sunbed itself. So Amanda, it's just been amazing. Guys, you know, thank you for watching this. Hopefully it's inspired you that everybody has a story. But it's always remembering finding that emotional connection. If you're nervous in any way, you know, if you need any support, you know, come to us. There's Amanda, there's, you know, we've got a team of PRs as well that you can, you know, we can put you in touch with, that can help you with your story, and to sometimes find what your story is, but also mastermind with other people. You know, we've got a great community. You know, when you come on the PR Hour Live, sometimes you might say, you know, go to one of the other members, can we have an hour together? I'll tell you my story, you tell me yours. Let's see what we think the media would like. I'm a big fan of masterminding, but we'll help you with that as well. But start somewhere. Have I missed anything, Amanda? Have we covered everything off?
I think we've covered everything off. I think,
brilliant.
Yeah, you know, and we're always at the, I'm always at the end of the phone. If, you know, just that half-hour chat might just be the thing that gets you going, really.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with it, guys, and hopefully you'll get some PR out. We can't wait to see you on future events, and thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording this, but Amanda, you stay on. Thank you so much for joining us as ever, and don't forget to watch all the other interviews as well. Thanks, Amanda. See you all soon.
Thank you.